If I said to you, hey, it's Saturday, The Circle, and Family Feud, what would you say is a common thread? I suspect you already know, but the answer in just a moment. Producer extraordinaire, that's French, Pam Barnes. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm going to get straight into it and lob, I think, an easy question to start with. What did you do before television?
Well, I was going to do nursing, but I was too much of a sook to do that because every time I went to the hospital, I cried. So that wasn't obviously the career for me.
I see. And so you started in a temporary position at GTV9. What was that?
My first job at GTV was temporary for a month, looking after the live commercials that were for IMT. Graham Kennedy would, as people who think that far back, he did a lot of live commercials which were highly entertaining. They would book, a minute's advertising, and they could end up with 3 or 4 and lots of comedy and all of that. But what I did was I was the linchpin between the sales department and the production department. So I would get the scripts and I would get all the props and things that were needed for that. And I liaised with the agencies and the prop department and the production department at 9. I was sort of assisting somebody, but turns out that somebody liked to have a lot of long lunches. So basically he went to lunch and I did the job. So after a month, I said, so what happens now? And they said, well, you might be here for the rest of your life. And I went, okay. So I was pretty happy with that. So that sort of, I guess I proved that I could do stuff.
And Graham clearly tested the boundaries with sponsors.
Oh, clearly. But of course.
How was that for you?
Well, I really didn't have to answer any sort of questions to sponsors and things the next day, so it didn't particularly worry me. I used to just sort of laugh along with it because it was always funny. Raoul Merton, all of those sort of stupid things that they did. Alka-Seltzer, dropping Alka-Seltzers into glasses from a great height. Just classic stuff that you don't see any of these days.
Absolutely. There's the infamous dog live commercial.
Power commercial where Rover, Graham's dog, sort of came in and lifted his leg on the camera. It was amusing. So, I guess that was the beginning of just let it happen TV and follow what was happening. And if it was entertaining, just let it breathe. And everyone loved that sort of thing because you just never knew what you were going to get.
Yes, and I guess from the sponsor's point of view, it's that old adage, any publicity is good publicity.
I guess so, yes. People still talk about it today, so I must have cut through.
Yes. And you were there on that infamous night of the Crow Call.
Yes, I was. And who would have thought that you could lose your job because of that? I mean, truly. But anyway, I think there was more behind the scenes than I was aware of. Clearly, I was just running around doing my job. But anyway,
yeah, times have changed.
Times have changed, but it was fantastic because there was Graham on the host set side, and then when there would be other talent on the other side of the studio. So it was my job to also program it so that it was possible to do everything that needed to make it to air. One night we had 20 live commercials. I remember that was just hell on wheels. But wow. Anyway, we had Miffy Marsh over there with Graham over there and Rosemary Margan and Philip Brady and just all sorts of mayhem, truly. And there was a show. That was just the commercial breaks.
Yes. Well, live commercials within the show.
Yes.
And talking about anything goes television, you worked on the Don Lane show?
I did for 2.5 years. I did the Don Lane show, the beginning of it, and that was wonderful too, because Don had Bert as his sidekick and really good entertaining stuff. Peter Feynman was the director and also the executive producer, and Don and Bert just trusted him implicitly. You know, anything that Peter wanted to do, they just sort of whatever you say, sort of thing. So he was, you know, quite genius. He still is. But anyway,
Yes.
I was very lucky to have worked with him too, most definitely.
And so what was it like working with Don and Bert and Peter Feynman?
It was great. We're just, you know, we're all on the same page in terms of, you know, entertaining, and everyone worked hard, and everyone believed in each other. That, you know, because live television is a matter of, what you would know, is a matter of trust. You've got to hope that the people who are, you know, out there with the camera on them actually know what they're doing and know how to get in and out of things. And there's only so much of this you can do from anybody to take the slightest bit of notice of you.
What was your role on Don Lane Show?
I was producer of the show. Peter was executive producer, and you know, I would sort of book all the acts and coordinate all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, but I remember we had Sammy Davis Jr. driving into the studio and getting out and running to the host desk and having a chat with Don. I mean, just sort of things that you wouldn't think would even be possible. But we did, over the years, we've done a lot of things that you wouldn't have thought would be possible. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sadly, so much of it is not possible now.
I know. I miss it, and I think that, what can we say? There's decisions made by people that it was all too expensive, and then, you know, I guess woke came into it, and people being too scared to be sort of on the edge and all that sort of thing. It's a shame, because we had, like, you know, Don Lane and Hey Hey and all of those things. We're sort of like, there was a number of levels that the show, you know, was on. So the kids got one thing, and then the adults got the other. So you know, and very, very rarely really crossed the line.
On the Don Lane Show, you had an incident with the RAAF band.
Oh yes, that lives with me today. I can still see every last bit of that in my head. We had a competition for a trip to San Francisco, and we had thousands of entries. Of course, in those days, everyone had to write in their entry on the back of an envelope and send it to blah, 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 you know, GBO box, Richmond 3121. Anyway, we got thousands and thousands of entries. And we had this sort of meeting about how best to, you know, choose the winner, because there was so many. So somebody said, oh, let's get a drop box and put them all in, and then we'll raise it up, and then Bert will come along and go bang, bang, and the lock will open, and, you know, there'll be this cascade of thousands of entries, and Bert will pick one out, and it'll all be very fair. You couldn't possibly, you know, make it look like it was rigged. The only possible thing that went wrong with that was that no one quite estimated the weight of thousands and thousands of entries in this wooden box that had been specially made, because once it was raised, the weight of the envelopes jammed the lock. So there was a lot of tension, should we say, as Bert was trying to, you know, knock the lock.
All playing out on live TV.
All on live TV. Don's losing his mind back on the host set. Bert, as you know, thrived on things going wrong. So he was having a wonderful time and ad-libbing this, that, and the other. There was absolute chaos, because no one knew if that was ever going to open or, you know, whatever. So we went to a commercial break. There's people running around, you know, trying to fix things. Max Morrison comes out on the sort of thing, and he's trying to, you know, make that happen and make that thing open. To be honest, I cannot remember to this day how it actually opened, but somehow we got it all down on the ground, and there was a pile of things, and we picked a winner. This is 20 minutes later from when we first started. So Meanwhile, the show is going a little bit backwards because we've still got a lot of things to fit in, including the RAAF band who had been there all day, and they were all standing out in the prop bay, completely oblivious to what's going on in the studio, had no idea. There was no monitor outside to even give them a hint of what's going on. So they're all standing there lined up from with their they bought their own little stools. So they had their stools under their arms and their trumpets and their, bassoons and whatever else they had, with the sergeant major at the front. So anyway, Peter Feynman, sort of, because he's executive producer, he says, we've got to drop the RAAF band. And I went, oh, no, we can't do that. They've been here all day, blah, blah, blah. No, we can drop them because there's not time to get rid of that and set them up. And I was saying, no, this is all in the commercial break. I'm saying, no, we can do this. We can move Normie Rowe here and we can do that. And he's saying, I said, drop them. And I went, oh, shh. Okay, so I had to go outside, open the big studio door and sort of stand there and say, I'm terribly sorry, but we've had some problems with the show and I'm going to have to say that, you won't be able to be on tonight. Well, the man who was in charge of it, he just went me. He was so angry, which I couldn't blame him for, but it was sort of like, you don't understand what you've missed out on what's been going on in there. So anyway, I remember Kevin Arnett, who was a regular on the John Lane show, he came to my aid and sort of said, it's not her fault and whatever. Anyway, it made the papers. It was such a debacle. It was terrible. Anyway, they never, ever came back. I didn't bother to ask them if they would like to come back because I think I knew the answer.
And I want everyone to picture the world's nicest person to be told off by the head of the RAAF band.
Oh, it was horrible.
But that is the stuff that made live TV.
Yes, exactly. And, numerous times on Hey Hey when things went horribly wrong, or just we'd sort of go, oh, well, we won't do that again, because what can you do? There you are. You think it was going to be a live cross that was going to be fantastic, but didn't work out quite the way you planned, but, it was live. And that's why people watched, because it was live. You never knew what was going to happen.
And never fear, we will get to a Hey Hey Saturday in due course. But you've got so much to get through. It might take a while.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk a pre-recorded show now. You were a producer on Sail of the Century in the Tony Barber era.
I was. So, and that was my first sort of pre-recorded game show as such, and it was really interesting because there's so much that you wouldn't have any sort of idea about that goes on behind the scenes. As you know, there were certainly layers that I hadn't necessarily appreciated, but it's just fascinating to know that that goes there and that goes there, and that has to be like any sort of television, it's got to be well organised. I love doing it, and we had a great team of people who were proficient at it, so it was good.
And that was obviously in a period pre-computer, so you went to the encyclopedias for judicial things?
If anything, if a question was queried, or an answer was queried by a contestant, we had to, stop tape, and then I had to run upstairs to the control room, get out the Encyclopedia Britannica, and sort of then take the encyclopedia back down to the contestant and say, see, it says here, this is the answer. This is where we verify our questions. These days, it would be a quick Google, and there's your answer. With this, stopping tape wouldn't be for quite so long.
Well, this may alarm you, but you can't believe everything you read.
Really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The model of a quiz show, certainly now, and I imagine it was the same at the time, was 5 in a day?
Yes, it was correct. 5 in a day, yeah.
So it's quite grueling. You do the whole week.
Yes, that's right. And then you do the prize reads and the car spinning around on the tablet, and the money coming down in the thing and all of that. Yeah. But yes, five in a day is standard, and they are long days to keep everybody's energy up, the contestants and the host and, all of that sort of thing, and to just make sure that all the I's are dotted, as the day goes on.
We'll go back to live for a moment. The Bicentenary show, Australia Live.
Huge. Absolutely huge. It was for the beginning of the Bicentenary. It was to celebrate that. It was Peter Feynman's idea, and it was like a slice of life on the night of the either the first day of the Bicentenary. So we did live crosses to 70 locations. I think it might have even been 72 locations across the Channel 9, the ABC, SBS, and lots of local stations. It was through OSAT and Telecom, and so it was my job to organise all of the locations and all of the crews going to the locations. We had lots of survey trips. And so every time we did a survey trip, they'd have to sort of get all the technical people to go on these surveys to the Northwest Shelf and to all sorts of places all around Australia. Anyway, it was also before the internet and before emails. What were they?
Yes.
They'd only just invented the fax machine, which was, I just couldn't believe a fax machine. I thought, oh my God, you put that in there and, whatever.
Well, please explain the fax machine to our listeners.
You would put something that was, had writing or information on it on your side. You fed it through a machine and it came out at the other end with exactly what was on that in the other end, the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was just amazing. I was completely gobsmacked.
Like a photocopy, and it took a long time from memory.
Sometimes it did, depending on where it was going, because there's a lot of, information that needed to be collected to spit it out the other end. But, I mean, basically, that didn't even come into play for what I was doing, because most of the places that I was organising were a long way from technology. So most of it was done on the phone. So they just had to trust that I was who I was and that I wanted to book this many rooms for this many people to get to, wherever. And so it was a mammoth job. But it was, it was very rewarding in the end.
And 4 hours from memory?
Yeah, 4 hours. Live television with Clive James and Ray Martin and Jan Event as the hosts. Yeah. And they were in Sydney and, just sort of throwing to various locations around the place. Most of them pulled off without any problems. There was one on a train going in South Australia that sort of got a little bit of a hiccup technically, but miraculously most of it worked. So there's a lot of people that almost fell down dead at the end of it. I was there courtesy of vitamin B injections.
Well, we still use them now.
Yes.
A little known fact, you worked on the pilots for Tonight Live with Steve Isaac.
I did. It was that was fun. Yeah, with Mike Cole Jones and Steve, of course, and a bunch of other fun people. Yeah, it was good. A lot of it's a bit furry in my memory.
Because I'm going to get to things everyone talks about a little later, I'm going to talk about several years later the Einstein Factor for the ABC, which in fact, in terms of mechanics, shares many similarities with Hard Quiz, but obviously doesn't have the Tom Gleason factor part.
Yes. So Einstein Factor was hosted by Peter Berner, and he had just come from a show the ABC were doing called Backburner. And I think they decided not to go ahead with that, but they wanted to keep Peter, so they asked what sort of show he'd like to do. And he said he would like to do a quiz show. So, miraculously, here I have a format for a quiz show, which was called the Einstein Factor. so he said yes, and then I got brought in to sort of turn it into a format, because it was just a bit of blurb on a piece of paper that wasn't very practical at the time. So with other people, including Michelle Sears, who had worked on Sale of the Century, and a few other really good people, we sort of developed a format. And funnily enough, one of our we did lots of trials, and two of the people that we got in to be either contestants or the Brains Trust, which was part of the format, were a couple of young university students called Hamish and Andy, and they were, needless to say, very good. And I could sort of tell straight away that we were going to see them again, not necessarily in the grounds of the university, but on the
well spotted
on the telly box. Yes, so they were very good. They were very good, particularly Hamish. I have to say, he was so quick witted, as we all know.
And one of the Brains Trusts that you reunited with there, also with caustic wit, like Tom Gleeson, is Red Simons.
That's right. Yes, it was great to be able to, use Red in a different format, a very knowledgeable format, which we all know he's a very clever man. So, yeah, it was good. And I met lots of people that I've never have met before, and had lots of wonderful. We had Stephen Hall as a writer, and Ressus Hedger, and it was great. It was good. It was good fun. But I really, in the beginning, I thought, oh, really? Who is going to watch people who only know about 18th century steam trains? I just thought that was a little bit bizarre, but as it turned out, lots of people, including me.
And you can see it now with Tom's show.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, he's so clever. Yeah. Caustic. I love it.
Caustic.
It's been around it for a while.
Yes.
So you were executive producer of The Singing Bee at 9. That was sort of at the start of those sort of programs. What are your memories of that?
I remember Joey Fatone was the host. To this day, I can't remember how that happened, but he was from one of the world's most popular singing groups, but he came out. He was a lovely man. He was great. He's great to work with, but it was sort of, for him, it was a complete. You never thought you were going to see, someone like him, hosting a television show in Australia. But it was quite a fun format. Yeah, and then the second series, I'd gone by then, but Tim Campbell did it. And it was good.
That's right.
Yeah.
When the X Factor was first on 10, you were a producer on that.
Yes.
Do you think later incarnations were very similar to it, or was it a different formula?
Initially, I found it a bit weird, to be perfectly frank, because they had, one of the judges was Mark Holden, who was a judge on Australian Idol. So I found that a conflict of interest, but that was a network decision. And then there was John Reid, who only inner industry people would have known. He used to be Elton John's manager.
Yes.
And he certainly could spot talent, and Kate Sobranos. I couldn't understand, mostly Mark, because he was already associated with another show in a big way. Kate did a great job. She's wonderful. She's warm, and she's very relatable, and, terrific talent. I met some nice people. I travelled around Australia doing auditions. Yeah, it was fun.
Now you have Australian Idol and The Voice, etc. What do you think differentiates these large talent formats today?
I'm always surprised that there's a never-ending supply of people who want to be on it, and who are extremely talented. But I don't think that these days there's the outlet for them at the other end. When they become the winner, where do they go? The things are so different now I feel sorry for people who are trying to break through in the world of entertainment today, to be honest, because there's very few outlets.
I'm going to throw to something else that's largely forgotten. I only remembered last night. At 7, you did How Much Do You Love Me with Denise Van Outen.
I only remembered that last night myself. That is so funny that you say that. Oh, what was that show doing on Channel 7? What was that show doing on the Blue Heelers Network? I remember I was working at Artist Services and we were asked to do the show for the network. And then when we came and looked at it, we sort of went, oh, that doesn't seem very Channel 7 Blue Heelers at all. That seems a little bit sort of out there. And when were they going to put it on and all of that? So initially, the show was very successful in England, but it was on a Friday night at 10:30 or something on a Friday night. So it was successful and appealing to people who'd been to the pub and were half shot and would sort of sit and watch something that was sort of beyond bizarre. But Channel 7 decided to put it on at 7:30 on a Tuesday or Wednesday night or something. We had contestants who had to guess things, and one of them was guess who the person was that had a red rose between their butt cheeks. And I do remember that was also on a rather large advertisement on the Monash Freeway. I nearly drove off the road on my way home one night watching that. But the funniest thing for that was Denise Van Outen, who was not terribly well known here, but was, wonderfully talented. She came out and she had bright pink hair, like bright, like, this sort of coloured hair. And I can remember Tim Warner saying to me, I booked a blonde. Because he'd seen it it got the format at Cannes, at the festival. And he said, I booked a blonde. Tell her she has to be blonde. I went, oh, I don't know that that's a job I really want to do. Anyway, so her manager was a lovely man. And I said, the network would like to have Denise back to being blonde. And his words were, good luck. And so, needless to say, she did the entire series with particularly pink hair. But she was fun. She was great. She was very talented, and we had a great bunch of people working on it. And then we never. It didn't last very long. Not all of the episodes went to air, but I did make sure that all of the contestants got paid or got the prizes that they were offered. And I felt that if anything came out of that, I did the right thing by all the people who had to humiliate themselves on television. Mind you, they did it willingly, but,
You bring up an interesting point. Can you explain to people what happens with aired or unaired episodes of quiz shows or game shows?
Yes. So in in everybody's contracts, there is always the contract that no one ever sees because it's in very small print somewhere in the reams of things you look for, to say that if the episode is not aired, you do not get your prize, you do not get your money. So and I don't know how often those things happen these days. That was the only show I've ever worked on where things didn't go to air, so people were in danger of not getting their prizes. But I was quite determined that they would get them, and they did.
Good on you.
Good on me. Yeah, give me a halo. Yeah.
Now, talking of live television, but massive productions, you're executive producer on both The Logies and Carols by Candlelight.
Mm-hmm.
Both amazing
Big
shows
production.
with very intricate planning, yes.
I love both of them. I love doing the Logies because I actually think the Logies should be treated with a lot more respect than they are. There's a lot of, the media always go, the Logies, and it's all sort of like, should be ashamed of them. No, we should celebrate them. They're the only awards we have in our industry. and everyone should be 100% behind them instead of, knocking. It's the big tall poppy syndrome, isn't it? To make a show like that and make everybody happy is not an easy thing. To get all the networks happy and to get all their presenters and to even it out so that the host broadcaster's not got more people than the rest of them, and keep everyone happy is not an easy task.
Any stories from Carols by Candlelight?
I just adore that show. I adore Christmas carols. And so my worst problem with that show is I cry all the way through carols. So it was sort of like a battle when you've got someone giving a big emotional, version of a song, to not just stand there and cry my way through it. But I managed. But I remember when the rehearsal day, walking onto the set and going, oh, I don't like that Christmas tree. Because we'd had lots of meetings about everything, excluding the colour of the decorations on the Christmas tree. So it was a blue Christmas tree, and that's not my Christmas. My Christmas is a green tree with gold and red mainly. So they had to take all of those down and redress it the next day. And it was very nice on the night.
Interesting that you say that you cried during it, because the late great director Adrian Della Virgin, who used to do carols, apparently used to sing all the way through.
Yes, he did. Yes. Oh, that'd be more off-putting than me crying, I think. Depending if he's in tune or not.
Coming up in part 2 with Pam Barnes, all the stuff that she's best known for: Hey Hey It's Saturday, The Circle, Family Feud, and a whole lot more.
You did take the show on the road a lot, and it must have been interesting when you turned up with a head on a stick and an ostrich puppet.
He had to send over all these props that we needed for the comedy sketches and things like that. And then in the end, he just thought, I'll just throw in that in case they need it, and throw in that in case they need it. I got a call from Customs in Orlando, sort of asking me to come on down and sort of identify what was in this trunk. Of course, you never knew what was going to come out of anybody's mouth, what they were going to, guess, and we couldn't go back and edit it. We'd just have to deal with, whatever they said to, hilarious consequences. Well, where do they perform now?
What are your thoughts on comedy then versus comedy now?
Oh, I prefer the then, I have to say. I remember I flew to Sydney with Chrissy Swan, and we met Yumi and a few other people. I can't even remember who they were. And then we decided on Georgie Coughlin, Chrissy Swan, Yumi Steins, and Denise Drysdale. So they met at the photo shoot. Talking about taking life in your hands.
What do you think makes it work?
Oh, I think it's an excellent format. The appeal of it is that, you have to say the first thing that comes into your head. But it's also, you've got the backup of being pre-recorded, so you can sort of get around that.